Iran is in total blackout. We've seen internet and phone lines being cut here. Of course, as you fully know well, the economy is a complete disaster, and you really do get the sense here that everyday Iranians are exhausted and losing hope as a result of what is, of course, pressure from this regime. So just characterize what we are seeing on the ground and perhaps what separates this most recent wave of unrest from the previous spiral that we saw in 2022.
As far as what distinguishes this round of protests from the last, in my opinion, it's really the regional environment and the intense security environment. I know a lot of people, when they're thinking about the immediacy of protests, they may not be thinking about the geopolitical context. But right now, in comparison with 3 years ago, what we see is that a government that has historically always enacted a brutal crackdown in order to quell any dissent has been, to a certain extent, confident that they could get away with it because of their regional and global alliances, which they thought would buffer them against foreign intervention that such brutal crackdowns may otherwise have invited. This time, with Hamas and Hezbollah severely weakened, with the Assad regime in Syria gone, and with Russia bogged down in Ukraine, the Iranian government just sees it as a much riskier proposition to crack down as severely this time as they have. That's the last time and every time before that. Nevertheless, that has not kept them from doing so.
So how seriously should we take President Trump's threat to strike the Iranian regime?
If you had asked me that prior to the 12-day war between Iran and Israel with U.S. involvement over the summer, I would have said probably at this point not very seriously. But we know that Trump has been unpredictable himself, and he is also subject to influence from other sources, right? So I think we should take it seriously to the extent that, as I said, he wants an easy victory, and he may see this as an easy victory. I also think that there are several factors that may not be considered by the casual observer in terms of what kind of intervention may occur. Iranians are extremely politically aware and politically sophisticated as a population. It's also an extraordinarily young and educated population, relatively speaking. So they are very aware of the history of foreign intervention, and we see quite a lot of tension on the ground between different factions of the protest movement, which has been growing day by day and pulling in other segments of society that have historically not been as involved. So I think we should take it seriously. We should also recognize that there are many competing interests here, and the assumptions that a lot of observers are making about what that intervention might look like might not be safe assumptions at this point.
Indeed. And as you say, President Trump is, of course, quite unpredictable. One of his strengths, but also perhaps one of his weaknesses as well. Sahar, you mentioned that the US and Israel as well had this 12-day war with Iran last year. Fortunately, that stopped short of a wider regional conflict. What options do you think militarily or otherwise the United States actually has at this point? What do you think is likely to be the playbook here for the president? Because I know we can't really make assumptions, but obviously that is the next critical thing to watch. It's what President Trump does next.
There's a reason that successive U.S. presidential administrations have not gone into Iran militarily, in spite of the fact that there's always been quite a lot of bluster from U.S. presidents. And I think that primarily since the invasion of Iraq in 2003, United States presidents have been aware that Iran is quite a different situation. Iraq was a population of about 27 million people at that time. Iran is about 90 million, and it is much stronger militarily than Iraq was under Saddam Hussein before 2003. So it has always been in the interest of the United States, at least in recent decades, to avoid a ground invasion or an sort of, as they say, boots on the ground kind of armed conflict with Iran. Military leadership here and civilian leadership also are quite aware of the difficulty that would be posed. That said, with the regional alliances that I mentioned being weakened, it is entirely possible that the prospect of military intervention seems to be a better opportunity now than it was in the past. There is also, it has to be mentioned, Israel has been sending out messages to Iran's protesters, in my estimation, trying to exploit what is quite an organic protest movement on its own. They're trying to exploit this moment. Mossad has sent out a message in Farsi on its social media channel, telling Iranians, we are there in the streets with you, and we always have been. This in the context of the 12-day war, where we know that a lot of those missiles were launched from inside of Iran and were smuggled in by intelligence agents. This sort of muddies the waters a bit, and I think covert action is probably more likely than some grand military gesture that we might have been expecting from a Trump administration. I think it also is going to involve, if there is some kind of a strike on Iran, it is going to involve regional allies of the United States like Israel, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, etc.